This is the Moshpit Backstage podcast for punk, metal and rock interviews and segments.
Hey, this is Lachlan from Adrift For Days, and you're listening to the Moshpit on Sin.
Lachlan Dale is a guitarist for Sydney doom band Adrift For Days, whose third album, Sleepless Grey, is out now. Lachlan, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
Now, let's go back to the beginning. How did the band start?
Oh, I used to play in a grindcore band with a couple of the members. We were kind of slowly losing interest in that style and kind of gravitating towards slower, drone-focused music. So we kind of broke off and started a new project. Ended up recruiting a few people, surprisingly, through street press. Pretty lucky to find a few players of caliber in the street press, I think.
Kind of I don't know, in some ways it kind of makes sense. In some ways it's kind of you're going from one end of the spectrum to the entire other end of the spectrum. How did that sort of come about?
I can remember one particular experience watching an Adelaide doom drone band called Space Bomb. I was playing in another band with them down in Adelaide, and I remember quite distinctly. I remember sitting in the middle of the kind of mosh pit or dance floor for that band and kind of falling into a bit of a trance. I mean, in my opinion, they're one of the best bands in Australia when it comes to playing that kind of meditative droning doom, and it just kind of, the effect it had on me, putting me into a trance and really taking me in my experience of the music to a new place. I guess it just really got me hooked on the style.
Now, in terms of Adrift For Days, how did you come up with that name?
Oh, it's probably one of a list of 300 or so. Most of them, pretty terrible. So I think as a phrase, it just seemed to describe some of the music we were playing with, some of the sounds, and one that people objected least to in the band. For
this album, in terms of writing it, what's that process like between you and the guys?
Well, with this album, I had a pretty specific idea in mind. So generally what happens is I'll lay down most of the structures for guitars. There are a few songs on previous albums which Ron contributed to or Ron created the bass riffs of. Generally, I'll write a skeleton of a song and bring it to the group and we'll work it up. And then only right at the end, the vocalist will come in and kind of really add his take to it, his sheen. With this album, I was really wanting to kind of progress beyond the sound on the first couple of albums. In particular, I'd gotten a little bit tired of playing, stoner blues doom kind of style. So I spent a lot of time playing with different instruments, different tuning, trying to play with different scales and modes and that kind of thing, and keep the songs a little bit more focused and tighter. So it took quite a while for us to get our heads around these songs, especially the ones that are a little bit different to previous albums. Probably took us, 2-3 years of jamming before some of them clicked. So it was a longer one than usual.
When you have an idea for the song, what is it like when it clicks? How do you know, all right, we've had this general song, we've been sort of happy with fixing it up, improving it, getting towards some sort of destination. How do you know, guys, we've arrived, this is what we've been aiming for?
Yeah, I think there are two parts. So when I actually write music, that usually comes from a place of really needing a cathartic kind of outlet for something. Like I'm trying to express something and kind of, get it off my chest. So that's a really, emotionally intense kind of way to start writing. So the measure kind of becomes, am I expressing what I want to? Does this riff kind of communicate where I'm at or what I'm trying to explore in terms of sounds? In terms of when it comes together with a band, I can actually remember with this album the exact moment that finally, after years of really working on this and struggling with it, that we knew we had an album. It's when our vocalist locked himself away for a week and just demoed relentlessly, came out with all these different ideas, and I was in some shoddy Jeep rambling through the mountains, the Himalayas in Ladakh in India, and listening to his demos and just going, oh my God, this is actually a thing. I think up until that point we weren't really sure whether it was going to come off, but as soon as we heard his demos, we knew it worked.
one thing that kind of fascinates me about that approach is you've got two sort of a couple of distinct ideas, but two I want to sort of bring out. You've got your sort of very trying to achieve some sort of catharsis through what you're writing, but then you've got vocals which are in a way sort of convey a very distinct set of emotions themselves. Do they jive together in the way that you sort of feel them initially, or is there any conflict between those two?
To be honest, the vocalist Mick and I feel are really connected in what we want to do with music. So the things I'm trying to express generally are fairly abstract, and they kind of always circle around themes of trying to understand meaning or de-stress or reach some kind of meditative state or peace with a difficult situation. And honestly, I think that's where Mick's vocals come from as well, like his lyricism and writing. I think especially we've been playing now together maybe 9 or 10 years. At this point, we are absolutely hooked in with, I guess, the styles of music we like and what we try and express. So what was incredible is this not only seemed to hit the original feeling of me creating these riffs and these song ideas, but he takes them further as well, and he really adds a new dimension to them.
Back to sort of developing the album, I was just scrolling through your Facebook, like I do with a lot of bands interview, try to get a feel for the band, any sort of things that I want to pick up on. And one of the things that interested me was the fact that you sort of seem to be approaching kind of the end state for the album in, I think it was January last year. And then it's kind of sort of petered out and then resurged somewhat, possibly at the beginning of this year. What happened in that kind of flow of events?
Yeah, it actually, our drummer had to go away for 6 months, and we'd been working up these songs. It was quite difficult, and it was getting to the point where he was going to have to go away, and most of the band wanted to kind of just put the songs on the shelf and let's come back to them. But I kind of felt otherwise. I kind of felt like we'd just begun to click with the instrumentation, and I wanted to keep things rolling. So we had 2 days in the studio, really like a day and a half, where we put down majority of the tracks, like just the drums and the guitars and bass, that kind of stuff. That was like August 2015, I guess. And then maybe August 2016. And then we came back to it in January and did a couple of days of overdubs and experimentation. And then from, January to kind of now, we just slowly mixed the album, really took our time trying to develop the sounds, even in post-production, popped in for another overdub session here and there. So this one really did take quite a while to pull together. And even just, mixing took quite a long time with this album. We just wanted to make sure we got it right, and making sure we didn't have any regrets when it kind of finally went out there into the public.
You talk a bit about, it sort of seems like a very internal process, you processing your thoughts, kind of your internal state. Does any sort of external inspiration come into that process of writing?
I think that's a good question. I don't think so. I think for me personally, I'm a pretty intensely inwardly focused person. So for myself, like obviously I try and use ideas I've heard from the external world, different styles of music and different bands. But when it comes to actually trying to write something, especially for this project, it really is trying to tap into something through music that's kind of, I don't know, it's hard to avoid cliches, but just something within me. So probably not external facing.
For this kind of music, in this sort of broad category where, I don't know, it tends to deconstruct the traditional ideas of how music kind of works. Where do you kind of sort of build the structure? How do you sort of form these ideas into something that doesn't necessarily make sense in a traditional kind of way, but when you listen to it, you're going through the ride, and it makes sense in that sort of experiential way?
I don't know. I think structurally this album is pretty, like, maybe some of it isn't. I think there are two main structures. One is like, multiple part songs, so with multiple movements that are kind of associated with one another, but have a different feel, different sensation. I mean, I'd actually say that some of the songs on this album are structured. I mean, I don't want to say conventionally, but they kind of are. Some, verse, chorus, verse, chorus. There's a bridge section, and you come back into the chorus. There's a bunch of them. They might take 8 or 9 minutes to go through that cycle, but vaguely that's kind of where they're sitting. Other ones I'd say are more, a collection of movements. So 2, 3 kind of big movements in a song associated with one another, but kind of different moods or different feels to each style. So, I mean, I'd say that they're maybe more conventional than some of our other albums where you've got, just these gigantic droney sections with fuzz and, swirling textures going on and screams in the background and just really bizarre kind of journeys really deeply into these particular sections. So I don't know. I do feel like it is, semi-traditional, but I might be losing perspective on that. I mean, all day I've been sitting around listening to like Hindustani classical music, where they kind of sit on a raga for 40, 50 minutes. So I might just be losing touch with what people think is normal at this point.
For the mastering of this album, you enlisted Mell Dettmer, who's done work on Sunn, KO Dot, and Wolves and Thrones, among many, many others. Why did you choose her to master it?
I'd worked with her once, or I've worked with her twice before. I worked with her once before with another one on my Serious Beak, which is kind of like a, crazy prog, math, gent, psych kind of band. And she added this, she made the whole thing so incredibly heavy. She does something with like the sub frequencies that she gives it this incredibly heavy tone. And that band for me doesn't have the kind of drony, thick, fuzzy tone that Adrift For Days is. I think I just we were talking with our producer, Tim Carr, who we've worked with on many releases before, about who to go to. And he just said, look, I think we should go to Mell. And I think it worked perfectly. She absolutely nailed the sound of the album. And, just like when Mick adds a layer, when Tim Carr, our producer, adds a layer, like she did that again. And she added her spin on what we're doing. I think it's just heavy as hell. It's great.
So for kind of people, because there's a lot of different sort of styles that go on the radio that I'm on. When you talk about drone, can you sort of explain for people what that means and why it attracts you? Because it's kind of this, I think for people who are into more mainstream music, it's a very bizarre kind of thing.
I think the attraction kind of goes back to, some of the original reasons that humans made music. I mean, they made music to be transported into other states, to fall into trances as part of rituals and meditation and kind of religious practices. I think there's something really kind of primal about it. To describe a drone, I guess, is like a singular note that is ringing out, a sound that is kind of ringing out over time. And there's a certain rhythmic element to it that if you concentrate on it and you focus on it, it does change your perception of time and kind of your mind state. So I think for me, going back to where I first heard that kind of style and got really into it, someone like Space Bomb, they sound quite angry and they're big and they're these loud bands, but there's something, it adds a new dimension to what they're screaming about. It's for them, there's this really deep yearning for humanity to kind of return to nature, and this feeling that the way humanity has evolved and civilization has evolved, we've really separated ourselves from the kind of essential parts of the natural world. So I think that is kind of fundamental to the drone sound, and at least for me, that's why I'm attracted to it.
The way you chose to distribute this album is kind of one of these models that's coming up sort of more and more, and I talked to a bunch of people about the different models they've approached releasing material, and I think this is probably the first person I've talked to about releasing under kind of a pay what you want model. People, should pay you for the brilliant work you've done and the incredible sounds that you're providing them with, but effectively they can get it for free. Why did you choose to distribute it in this way?
So the album's been released on my label that's, I think, been around for 6 or 7 years, Artist Catharsis. with that label, I really did want to experiment with new forms of distribution and ideas of running a record label. At the start, I was really focused on giving out free releases or pay what you want releases, because Bandcamp kind of opened up that as a potential avenue. And I mean, over the years, I've seen really great growth in terms of, bands being discovered or getting a huge amount of new fans or downloads and that kind of stuff. So I do really like that model. If you can kind of take away any barriers for someone to actually enjoy, you can connect with it, then provided your music's interesting, people are going to share it with their friends, with their networks, and that kind of creates a little bit of a viral effect. We've had a lot of back and forths on it. I think the main thing for us is we want this music to be heard. We're pretty realistic about the fact that, being a psychedelic doom band, we're not exactly going to make a whole lot of cash, but for us, the more people that listen to the music and connect with it, the better. I mean, it kind of aligns with why we create music in the first place.
You mentioned Artist Catharsis, your record label. What is it like to sort of own a record label for this kind of music, like sort of more out there kind of music?
I mean, the experience for me has been excellent. I feel really connected to a huge network of incredibly creative people who are, they're creating art that doesn't really align with trends or isn't particularly popular. And I absolutely adore that fact. The whole label is kind of built around trying to find progressive or experimental sounds, I guess, or they can be a little bit more traditional, still probably, I guess, on the heavy end, as long as they have that kind of cathartic, intense element to them. But I spent a lot of my time trying to find those new scenes, new sub-scenes in Sydney and across Australia, and trying to connect them with each other. So there's a little bit of this idea that I'm helping build a larger scene for this music. And I guess here I'm talking about the broader stuff we release. I've released the Ethiopian jazz band and, a string ensemble and some ambient noise acts, indie rock, garage rock, acoustic folk. Like, the label is pretty broad in the type of stuff that we release.
When did you first start listening to music?
When I was growing up, my dad was playing music all the time. He's a guitarist. I think he was generally strumming a nylon string acoustic, around the house. He'd be sitting at dinner, just sitting before the TV, like just kind of fiddling away during the ad breaks. And, he got me into a lot of, I guess, early 70s rock. Like, he really liked his Carlos Santana and his Pink Floyd and that kind of stuff. So I think that was really quite influential.
How'd you get into more of the heavy side of music?
I can remember being at high school and listening to System of a Down or like Metallica and those kind of more mainstream bands. They kind of, I think at the time, they just kind of spoke to me a little bit, like that heavier sound, being someone who I suppose wasn't particularly happy with some of the things I saw going on in the world. I can remember being 16 or 17 and reading a book on the history of genocide and basically international communities in action over the world over the last century or so. And I mean, that really deeply affected me. So I think I connected a lot with that kind of sense of frustration and kind of, I guess, anger. I guess it's anger. Maybe it's angst. Who knows? And as I kind of started going to shows, we met some people, and I ended up helping a guy who runs like a pretty extreme metal label, Grindhead Records. I ended up helping them do copywriting and marketing and kind of built a website for them, and ended up just helping run that label. It was kind of my introduction.
Do you have any favourite bands or albums?
Yeah, look, at this point, obsessively listening to music for 10, 12 years, that gets pretty difficult. I can definitely, think back and remember the bands that were super influential in my playing and my style. For a band like Adrift For Days, it mightn't be that surprising, but, bands like Neurosis and Earth. There's a very cool band called Boris and Neurosis, which is like doom jazz, like incredibly heavy, slow jazz, which is pretty cool. Off the top of my head, they've definitely been very influential. These days, it's almost like a curse just trying to spend hours and hours searching out something that's going to give you a spark of inspiration or give you a new perspective on music. Hence why I've been sitting around listening to rugs all day. But yeah, it's still fun.
Adrift For Days. Their third album is out now, Sleepless Grey. Lachlan, thank you so much for joining me. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Thanks for listening to the Moshpit Backstage podcast. You can subscribe to us on iTunes and Omni. To find out more about the show, go to www.syn.org.au/moshpit. Like us on Facebook at facebook.com/moshpitonsyn and follow us on Twitter and Instagram at moshpitsyn. The regular Moshpit radio show broadcasts punk, rock and metal tunes and interviews every Thursday nights on Syn 9.7 on FM and digital radios. Listeners outside of Melbourne, Australia can stream Syn 9.7 online at www.syn.org.au. Thanks to Vintage Ruin for the music.
Hi, this is Tomato from Flashgun Apocalypse.
Hi, I'm Enid from Girls' School.
I am Phoebe Pinnock from Heavenly Axe.
Hey, this is Gary Oldmead of the Misfits.
Hey, this is Kat Sproul from Horizon's Edge, and you're listening to the Moshpit on Syn FM.
Hi, this is Einar from Leopard.
Hi, I'm Virginia Lilly from the band Lily.
This is Raul from 1349.
Hey, what's up, everybody? This is Ali from Zebrahead.
Hey, everybody, this is Charlie Benante with Anthrax, and you are listening to the Moshpit on Syn.